Welcome to the deep dive. You send us the sources, and we explore them together, try to pull out what's most interesting, make you the most informed person around.
Hopefully.
So today, we've got a really fascinating one. It's a transcript from a YouTube video, and it takes a pretty sharp turn on how we usually think about biblical salvation.
That's right. Yeah, this is definitely not the standard explanation you might expect.
Right.
The video basically lays out this argument that our modern view, our understanding of salvation has been heavily shaped by a Hellenistic worldview.
Okay, Hellenistic, so like ancient Greek philosophy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which tends to emphasize, that split between the soul and the body.
Uh-huh.
And the argument is that this is actually quite different from the original Hebraic view you find in the Bible, which is much more holistic, integrated.
Okay, wow. So this Hellenistic influence, that sounds like kind of a big deal then.
Huge deal, according to the video.
So the claim is the separation, soul and body, it's actually pulled us away from the Bible's core message.
That's the core of the critique, yeah. It even mentions how strongly Jesus criticized the religious leaders back then.
Right.
Suggesting maybe there are parallels today. But here's the twist.
Okay.
Despite this, fundamental critique, the speaker insists the actual truth about salvation isn't some complex theological maze. It's surprisingly simple. Logical, even.
Simple and logical. Okay, I'm intrigued. So what's the simple part? What's the core problem it identifies?
Well, the speaker argues the fundamental issue isn't just, individual sins here and there. It's bigger.
How so?
It's that humanity has essentially fractured its covenant with God.
Covenant, like a contract, an agreement.
Exactly. Think of it like a binding agreement. Specific responsibilities for both sides, humanity and God.
Okay.
And this broken agreement, it's not just a story from Eden. It's presented as an ongoing issue, a continuous failure, really, to live up to God's principles for how we should all thrive together, communally.
Wow, a broken contract with God. That's a powerful framing. So if that's the problem, what's the simple solution the video offers?
It's pretty direct, actually. The solution, according to the speaker, is basically returning to the core principles of that original agreement.
Just go back.
Well, actively living by them. And this is where it gets really interesting, I think.
Okay.
The video argues God isn't just looking for individuals who have personal faith, in isolation.
Right.
Instead, the focus is on finding people who genuinely want to create a world where everyone thrives together.
Okay, so much more practical, community focused, less about just personal piety alone.
Precisely.
So what does that actually look like in concrete terms, according to the video?
Well, the idea is that God's strategy involves building communities around these individuals.
Communities based on what? Not family ties?
No, not kinship or social status.
Yeah.
Based on a shared commitment to these core values and principles. Like an ideological community, you could say.
An ideological community.
Yeah, and within that context, the whole idea of holiness gets kind of redefined.
Redefined how? Not about being separate or ascetic.
Exactly. It's not about isolating yourself or living some super austere life. Holiness is the very act of living together in a supportive, fair, just community, breaking down those old social barriers.
That really is a shift in perspective on holiness. Okay, so these communities, their purpose isn't just for their own benefit, right? The video mentioned something about a showing mission.
Yeah, the showing mission. What's fascinating there is the emphasis on demonstrating a different way of life, not just talking about it.
Show, don't tell.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
The speaker argues the main goal of these communities is to literally show a way where people genuinely flourish together, living out these principles so visibly, so compellingly, that others are just naturally drawn to it. Not because of a sermon necessarily, but because they see it working.
It's that power of example, isn't it? Leading by example.
Totally.
And that addresses, I guess, the limitation of just pointing to, one successful person.
Right. Because as the video points out, one person thriving, maybe that's an exception, but a whole community flourishing, that offers a much more relatable vision. Achievable, maybe, for ordinary people.
Okay, that makes sense. But how does this avoid the pitfalls of, say, other communal ideals? The video mentions things like communism or socialism.
Yeah, the speaker is careful there. They distinguish this vision from those humanistic attempts that, let's face it, haven't always worked out as planned.
Right.
The crucial difference, the video argues, is that this model is grounded in that covenant with God.
Okay.
It makes it fundamentally a matter of faith, of shared divine principles, not just human effort or ideology alone.
Got it. So this idea of covenant communities showing mission, does the video connect this to anyone specific in the Bible? Like an example?
Oh, absolutely. Abraham gets a lot of focus.
Okay.
The speaker presents him as a key figure, someone who really longed for and essentially started this kind of showing community.
How so? Based on what?
Well, you know the blessing God gives Abraham. You will be a blessing. All peoples on earth will be blessed through you.
Yeah, famous passage.
The video interprets that through the lens of Abraham having this deep, profound concern for a world where everyone prospers. It suggested that his actions, his intentions, they reflected this deep desire.
Interesting. So it's an interpretation inferring his motivation.
Yeah, presented as a logical inference, maybe not explicitly spelled out word for word in Scripture in quite that way. It emphasizes a kind of thinking, engaged faith, not just blind obedience.
Right, which connects back to that earlier point about not just believing, but understanding and acting. Okay, so what about the Promised Land, Canaan? Usually pictured as, flowing with milk and honey, land of plenty.
Yeah, that's another really interesting twist the video throws in.
It challenges that picture.
It proposes that Canaan might not have been this, lush paradise in a literal sense. It might have actually been a pretty harsh, difficult environment.
Really? Why? What would be the point of that?
The purpose, according to this interpretation, was for it to serve as a kind of model home, a test case.
A model home, like a demonstration.
Exactly. The idea was to show that even in the toughest conditions, if you lived according to these covenant principles, you could create a truly thriving community, a land flowing with metaphorical milk and honey, build through community, not just found.
Wow. That makes a success story even more powerful, doesn't it?
It really does. It's like saying, look, if we can make it work here under these conditions, then this way of life can work anywhere. Makes it much more compelling.
Okay, so pulling all these threads together, what's the final word on salvation from this perspective, the big takeaway?
Well, the conclusion the video draws is that salvation isn't primarily about, securing your spot in the afterlife.
Not just a future thing.
Right. It's about the active, ongoing process, building and participating in a just, equitable community, right here, right now.
So living out the covenant, that is salvation.
That practical living out, that showing mission in action.
Yes.
That is presented as salvation itself.
Right.
Which is, a pretty significant departure from the idea that just declaring a belief is sufficient.
Yeah, that feels quite radical. It directly challenges that whole faith without action idea.
It does. The speaker is pretty strong on that, even contrasting it with groups, historically, who got criticized for prioritizing belief over ethical conduct.
Right.
So ultimately, this video isn't just reading the Bible as religious doctrine, it's reading it as a practical guide, a blueprint almost.
For how humans can best live together.
Exactly.
Yeah.
With communal flourishing, this showing mission, as the absolute key to understanding what salvation really means, it reframes the whole narrative around that.
Okay. This has definitely given us, and I'm sure you listening, a lot to chew on. A really different way to look at things.
Absolutely.
So maybe the question for you, the listener, is thinking about this perspective. What might a showing mission community actually look like in your own life and society today?
That's a great question to ponder.
Yeah, it really pushes you to think about the real-world implications of this quite different understanding of salvation. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.